Okay, so this is the last project we're going to show. I'm going to run through this a little quickly. This is Collage House, which has been a project that's occupied the office for a very, very long time. It's located in New Bombay in Belapur, on this kind of little hillock called Parsik Hill. It's in a sense the equivalent of what Malabar Hill is in kind of South Mumbai, and the red circle there indicates kind of the site that we are located in. So one thinks that it would be kind of really nice to build on top of a hill where you get these views out, which you do, which the left side slows. But the first time we went to the site, we realized there was somebody kind of on the right of us, on the left of us, and somebody expected to be right in front of us as well. So we realized very quickly that the views are going to be limited, and what really needs to be kind of done is to create a sense of kind of privacy within, because you're going to be surrounded by these kind of neighbors all around you. So we were looking at again the idea of recycling in a sense, and that really came to us from again looking at kind of settlements in Mumbai all around us. And this is also something that has happened or is kind of consciously at the back of our mind, because both Shilpa and me have been teaching for a long time, and it's been parts of areas and kind of studies that we have done as part of the college or with the college. So what we felt in over there is that the poor are always looking up at the rich to kind of look at what they should do next, and kind of in terms of their aspirations. But the rich in some sense, or the privileged, never really bother to look at what the poor have to offer. And what we thought, that there was a fantastic kind of creativity, resilience, which is shown by the poor, which one could really learn from. And at no point did one really want to kind of romanticize poverty, of kind of fetishize it, but the idea is to pick learnings from them which could actually be applied elsewhere. And through that process we kind of actually worked on this idea of collaging, which actually came through that, where you have multiple sources of objects all kind of disjunct from each other, but all which come together in a sense to create a kind of a whole. So these are some of the earlier models we did, and what we kind of ended up doing is that how does one control this kind of mess, this kind of messy collage that kind of begins to come through. And the slide on the left is kind of the solution we kind of came up with, that there's a concrete kind of wrapper which contains all the elements and becomes kind of the container of the house, and contained within it would be this kind of mess of materials and elements that kind of bring all the different constituents in place. So the site was kind of very rocky because it was on top of the hill, like I said, and there's kind of a difference in the site of about 4 feet from the rear to the front. So if you see the bottom model, what we've done is we've retained that difference to situate the lower level to be about 4 feet higher than the front part. The center that you see over there is actually a courtyard which we created, which is not at the ground level but raised to the first floor, and below that is a large 50,000 liter rainwater harvesting tank, which kind of actually collects all the water from the house. So these were very early study models. You can see that kind of white patch is what was our kind of response to just screen the neighbors in a sense and open up kind of windows which were kind of just on the peripheries in a sense. That this is an early model which of course changed as we went along. These were some of the kind of 3Ds that we did. Just to kind of tell you guys, the screen on the right is kind of really compressed, so all the proportions are completely off, but I think these are far more correct. Anyway, so the idea of recycling that kind of takes over the house in different ways, and we're looking at the idea of windows and stone and pipes and metal and all of that, which kind of comes together in some way, and we kind of talk about that as we kind of go along. One major element that happens is the front facade, and you can see that transformation in a sense from the way it was over there to the way we actually kind of build it out eventually, which is not this kind of very contained patch, but this kind of element that kind of wanders around. We were very, very lucky to have our clients who were, really involved with us to actually be part of this. So we would actually show them drawings and ideas of what we were looking at, and every Sunday he would go out and kind of, talk to his contacts, walk the streets and figure out how he's going to get us the material to do this. We discovered these sellers in Dotaki area in Mumbai, where it's a large recycling market, where all the doors, windows and lots of other stuff from the city which is being dismantled ends up over there. So we spent about 2 to 3 days there going through their kind of stack and kind of catalog of windows. We'd pick out what we want, we'd kind of photograph it, document it, size it or whatever it is, and then we'd kind of go back to the studio and figure out a way to put this whole jigsaw together. So as you can see on the left, the panels actually don't touch the walls, or they kind of actually suspended, they're actually hovering, and one would normally find a window inserted into a solid wall, but the panels you see all around are actually polycarbonate. So it's a very kind of light structure, and the way it's actually designed is pretty much like a curtain wall. So it kind of hangs. So you can see that wall section over there, which shows you that the kind of slab ends and the window system actually just hovers right in front of it. So what this really did, and the reason I was kind of showing you the earlier thing is that as designers we are taught to kind of know exactly what we want to do, and as an office for a very, very long time we've operated like that. We would actually kind of hyper draw projects where everything to the nut, bolt, T is kind of drawn up and then issued to site, and then it's like, okay, there's going to be like no change kind of a situation. What this actually forced us was to re-look at a lot of these kind of practices that we were trained in or taught or we kind of accepted as being very normal, and it really kind of forced us to rethink methods of putting this together. So for example, in this we could only do a loose configuration, but we left a lot of it to the kind of carpenter and the kind of craftsmen who were working on it to actually figure out a lot of the joinery, the details, and then you kind of worked with them where their inputs were probably as important as ours to kind of put this entire kind of facade together. So there's a kind of abandonment of kind of preconceived notions of design that we kind of have. This is at the entrance. This is the kind of puja room. So there's a parking space here, and then you kind of walk into the puja room. That's the same space from inside. It's again stacked glass, which kind of forms this kind of very luminescent kind of drum, which brings. Yeah, it's next set. So I mean, we're going to kind of keep showing you the kind of process pictures simultaneously. So the rock actually came from the site. That's what we found on the site when we were first there. And of course, when we excavated, more of that kind of emerged, and actually the civil contractor refused to work with the stone, saying that it was not possible to kind of dress it. But we kind of insisted that no, that one should, and after trying us, a couple of different masons, we finally figured out a way to kind of put the stone together. So it's not highly dressed in the way one would imagine dressed stone walls could be, but we were okay with the fact as long as we were able to reuse this stone rather than kind of taking it away and kind of dumping it somewhere else. Similarly, the brick is kind of stacked and kind of carefully laid out, creating these kind of articulated openings and systems within. So next. This is the entrance. As soon as you kind of enter the from that blue door, you kind of come upon this lobby, and there's also an elevator that takes you up because it's ground and 3 levels. The elevator, again for us, was through our kind of memories of walking the streets of Fort and going to all these old buildings where you see these kind of meshes that kind of just enclose buildings. I mean, the lifts, and we thought that why should you have to move in a box within your own house? So it's just a platform lift that takes you through, and it's enclosed by these metal industrial meshes. What we have done, however, is worked with some artists in Bangalore, where they actually weave these metallic meshes as per kind of designs that you would give. And what we've really done over here is taken this idea of Krishna. Actually, the house is named Kanha, and the occupants are Krishna believers. So we've kind of taken this idea of Krishna and Vrindavan and taken that story across vertically. So you see Krishna, and just around, that's kind of the gopis dress, and as you go up you'd see that there are cows, and then it changes to the garden, and there are trees and monkeys and all that. So there's this kind of very playful theme which kind of connects back in a sense to who the owners are, and again creates in a sense a kind of an artwork that's very specific to the site. So these are, this is as you kind of climb up. The staircase is all concrete, and like all the slabs in the entire house are also exposed concrete. The house to us was also a kind of reaction in a sense to what was happening all around us, where people were just, post-liberalization, people were just buying products and kind of just cladding things over and covering things up, and everything was products, nothing was kind of being made by hand, and we were really interested in the idea of the handmade. So that's something again that's kind of been pushed across the house, and you will see that happening at kind of several levels, within the house. This is the kind of journey we took. So for the panels that we did, we started with the Sanji art kind of cutouts. It's a traditional craft that's done in Mathura, where you take paper and you kind of cut it with a small scissor, and you get this fabulous kind of cutout. That's the extreme left slide, or top left on the right hand side slide. And we abstracted those images to kind of become these patterns which would be workable for these craftsmen to actually kind of weave into these kind of fairly large panels of mesh. This is as soon as you arrive, so you enter through that kind of almost dark space, and then you come up this staircase, and that's when the kind of light really hits you, and the kind of courtyard kind of emerges over there. So that's the staircase. Again, it's very kind of finely crafted. It's I don't think the concrete is fabulous. I think just getting that was kind of painful. I think we've lost kind of the culture of building exposed concrete, especially in Mumbai. I think we still find it in Ahmedabad or Delhi or whatever, but 4-inch kind of thickness, which is kind of folded, and then it kind of tapers at the ends, and so it's kind of been a fairly difficult task. A lot of those are construction images which you can see. So you come into this kind of living space, and like I said, it opens up to the courtyard on the right side over there, and you see these kind of windows from within as well, and you see the kind of colored glasses and the kind of light that happens, and all of these are kind of openable to use as real windows as well, and we've retained the kind of grills that they came with, because fantastic variety of grills which were there, and it also kind of did the task of providing a kind of secure exterior. That's the dining in the kitchen there. The slab, as you will see over here, is actually faceted. So structurally, right across the house, we don't have beams which actually come down below the slab. So there was this ribbed slab which the engineer wanted to do, and we said instead of doing these kind of rectangular ribs, what if we actually faceted that? And so those were some of the earliest study models, and that's kind of the shuttering folded that way, and that's just when it's been kind of de-shuttered. What it does is it creates kind of an interesting kind of a special moment in that kind of concrete which goes across the whole house, and then you kind of begin to pick up on that on the floor. So you see there's a pattern which is again inlaid in brass that kind of picks up on that faceting, again all kind of hand done. That's the courtyard you come out into, and that's kind of a little drawing of the entire kind of network of how water is actually kind of managed across the project. So we have right on the top, actually the terrace, all the water drains into these kind of pipes. There's a bunch of them you can see at the bottom, which are like spouts. So during the monsoon, you'd actually see water kind of gurgling kind of out of this, and then it's channelized to 4 different chambers which kind of filter the water before it kind of stores it into this large tank. And with that, there's kind of a swimming pool that's kind of a small little lap pool, which kind of reuses the water as well. So there's a kind of looped system that happens where all the kind of water is kind of carefully managed. So we were kind of, I think sustainability has become kind of a much used word. I mean, and there's this whole thing, I think when the house was designed, which was like quite a few years back, this whole idea of green and LEED and all that was kind of, you know, really kind of playing in the market. And we were a little disturbed with the fact that yes, one must do all of those things, but the quality of the buildings was really kind of suffering, and like I said, everything was turning into a product. So we were losing these kind of delightful, joyful spaces that one should really have, and that's really to us the starting point of good architecture. And we kind of came across this very interesting quote by the founder of Architecture for Humanity called Cameron Sinclair, who said the most sustainable building in the world is the one you love, and it's something which the owners would kind of love to use, future generations would love to preserve, you know, in some sense. So I think that was really a starting point for us, besides kind of all these experiments that we were doing. And here you can see a little bit of how nature is kind of beginning to kind of take over the house in kind of, you know, different places, and I think it kind of becomes a little bit more seamless kind of with the environment. So this is another feature which we kind of did in the house, this whole what we call the pipe wall. It's basically offcuts of pipes that you get in scrapyards, which we've actually put together. So there are a bunch of them which are these spouts which are actually continuous, but a lot of the others are actually pipes which we've kind of stacked one over the other, and they kind of get these bands. And what it creates is kind of this texture of bamboo which happens. It's all MS pipes. A lot of people mistake it because of the grey color to be PVC, but they're all metal pipes. 4 out of those pipes are actually structural. They hold up the slabs and the roof as well. So I think you kind of allow for one thing to do many things, you know, I mean, so it also brings down water, it's also holding up the roof, it's kind of also using waste, it's kind of just multifunctional in that sense. This is the kind of wall that was clad in all these kind of scrap metal plates that we found. So everything from shipping yards to old kind of industrial waste that was there kind of has been used in that. That's the master bedroom. You can see on the left side the windows, again like I was explaining, floor to ceiling. That's the south side, so we have this screen of bamboo actually which cuts kind of the glare and also creates these kind of very interesting kind of patterns in the room inside. We are also interested in this whole idea of memory and kind of using familiar things in kind of new ways, and like the bed back is actually made up of ready-made kind of molding strips that you would get, which kind of just create this very three-dimensional kind of bed headboard, you know. That's the same metal kind of coming inside and kind of forming a little desk for a study in the master bed, and then on the right is the pool. Two of the toilets, that's the master bedroom. This is the powder room. Crazy kind of space, just having a little bit of fun there. It's completely wrapped on all its sides with mirror, which is actually beveled all around. So you get these multiple sizes of mirrors that kind of create this kind of crazy reflection that when you're inside, and that very kind of 70s pink kind of pipe is something that pulls together all the elements required. So you have a light, a kind of napkin holder, a toilet paper holder, everything kind of taken care of by that. That's the kind of staircase well, where you kind of move up to the first floor, sorry, the second floor now. Some of the bedrooms. So you can see the older windows actually reappearing in each of the rooms as fragments. This is the son's room. Again, just to mention, all the when we went to Dotaki, actually, we discovered there is like so much of really old, seasoned Burma teak available there, and kind of the client really kind of, this is really initiated by him, struck a really good deal with the vendor where he was willing to cut up the wood for us in any sizes that we want to create this kind of flooring. So instead of these kind of standard size strips, you can't really tell on the photograph, but we have like 4 different sizes of 2, 4, 6 and 8 inches wide, and they all kind of randomly pieced together, you know. That of course is the son's room toilet, which kind of steps out into that space. Here again, the wardrobe back is made up of blocks that you use for fabric printing. This is again something which I must credit our client to have gone out and kind of sourced and kind of found himself after kind of much kind of looking, you know. But I think it's interesting because such projects can only happen if you have in a sense that patronage to enable you to do these things. And here you can see the relationship that happens. So the other interesting thing about this house is that we have these clients, and he has a mother who's 95 years old and kind of has a slight mobility problem. He also has his son and his wife who recently had a child. So there's 2 children actually. One has just been born a few months back. So we actually have a family group from like 0 to 100 almost. And it's like a multi-generational family, much like Indian families kind of, you know, happen and kind of live together. And I think the courtyard works wonderfully well because you see activity across the courtyard, you see people, even though they kind of each have their own space, and you can actually kind of gather, you know, in the courtyard for kind of functions or common events in that sense. This is one more of our experiments. There are lots of them. We're not even showing all of them, but this is the top floor. So as you kind of ascend right to the top to the terrace, you kind of encounter this kind of shaft of light, and then if you look closely, you see that that entire kind of slab is curved, and when you look a little more closely and you realize, oh, it kind of looks like fabric, and you see the creases of fabric on them, and you see the imprint of a fabric, and that's really how it's made, and I think you can get a little sense of that on some of these photographs. And this entire thing again has come about in a sense by accident. I remember going to the site one day with our structural engineer, and the top slab was still not cast, and the staircase was, and you saw these beautiful kind of shafts of sunlight streaming through, and the engineer is telling me, Pinkish, you kind of have to leave this. We had a complete slab across, and that look how wonderful this is looking, and I kind of shooed him off that no, we can't do this. We have a lot of services on the top, because that curved slab you see is actually kind of holding a water tank within, and then there was an AC unit, and then there were solar panels, and there was like lots of things that had to go up there. But that thought kept kind of irritating me that you know, what he's saying kind of has a germ of truth in that. So we went back the next day morning and kind of reworked all our drawings and kind of looked at how we could really achieve this. So what we've done is actually just opened up a really small crack of light there. But during noon times, that light actually filters all the way down, right down to the ground floor actually. And then from the curved kind of slab, this whole idea of a light kind of system emerged, and then we thought of fabric, and then fabric led to kind of exploring that what if you leave all these kind of marks that fabric does. So it's actually, the shuttering is not wood, it's actually tarpaulin sheets, which you would see right now all across the city, blue tarpaulin, which is kind of silver on the other side, and it's cast with these kind of MS Tor steel rods, which kind of just hold the weight of the concrete in place. So this is again something we had to discover. We did one pour, learned the mistakes, and kind of went on from there. But it creates this kind of wonderful texture that kind of happens within. So that's really how the house kind of pans out. You can see that little water tank with the court slab on that right hand side drawing, with these kind of double height open spaces where the pool happens, and that's kind of the courtyard with the rainwater harvesting tank below. So in effect, it's this collage like we started with, this kind of concrete wrapper that contains this kind of multitude of materials and forms and things that are all kind of enabled within that. These are some of the kind of smaller, finer kind of details. We are a little obsessed with crafting and materiality and all this kind of exploration of different things. So just a little bit of snippet. So we can't really show you all of it, but so that's the rear elevation I was talking to you about. It's south, so again most of it is dead, keeps the heat out, and that screen actually filters the light. And as you can see above, there was some FSI left, and the client insisted, no, let's use it up, I don't want to leave anything for later. So instead of kind of, just extruding the house by one more floor, what we said is that, okay, what if we kind of create a completely different experience above, and we thought of adding this very, very kind of light pavilion at the rooftop to give you this kind of really different feel. And what we've done is got these 100-year-old columns from Kerala, actually from an old dismantled house there, which work structurally, so they're not purely aesthetic. They're actually, it's got a stone base which is bolted to these little concrete stub columns, and at the top again it switches back to a metal kind of column which is holding up an entire metal roof. So if one of those fails, this thing will kind of come crashing down, And then we didn't want kind of walls there, so it's just this very light kind of glazed pavilion, which, because you're on the kind of third level there, you get these fantastic views out all the way to the water, and you kind of overlook a lot of New Bombay there. So I think that's it. Thank you very much. And sorry for the extra time.
Thank you, Kishan Shilpa. That was a wonderful presentation. You actually kept on with your words of flexibility, layering and movement. Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation. We're slightly short of time, but let's at least have two questions to him, and then you can have a private discussion with him after the event is over. Anybody has a question? Yeah?
how did you resolve the structure? This is conceptually very great, like related to the basic design and visual design. So how did you actually use the exposed concrete and like how did you actually design it very structurally, like structurally efficient and all?
Yeah, so I think every project goes through several stages, okay? So here, because of the limited time and we've already taken extra time, we can't talk about everything. So, but during the course of the project, of course, one is working very, very closely with a structural engineer to kind of create kind of systems that both retain the idea of the house as well as do its job of kind of spanning, you know. So what we have is actually, you will also wonder where are the drop slabs for the toilets. I mean, there's a lot of things that you start thinking about it, there's a lot of things. So it has of course been resolved. I mean, there are ducts that bring pipes down and everything. So I think it will need more kind of time and explanation to really do that. But I think the project has been published in several places. You can take a closer look if you like to kind of do that. But I think the more important thing is that there will always be structural issues, there will be functional issues, there will be services, there will be, you know, all these constraints. And I think that's what Shilpa was touching upon earlier, the idea of reality, that there's a concept and then reality hits the concept and then you along the way dilute that concept, or you kind of, you know, the concept disappears. The idea for us is to keep fighting to make sure that the concept is not lost, you know. That's the tough part, but that's what I think one must strive for. And that's been our kind of effort or aim through most of our projects, that how can we retain the sense of what the concept was. And I think we've also learned that you can't be stuck with a concept. Sometimes, you know, midway through a project, you have to throw that concept aside and come up with a new one. But that concept is something that can still hold all these different parts of the puzzle together. I think that's really kind of the challenge which we face as architects, I think. Yes, absolutely. That's what I mean. That's what I mean. Absolutely. I hope that's remained. Yeah. So. Yes, and the services consultant and the AC kind of consultant, and there are so many others, you know. So I hope that answers your question partly. Yeah, I know.
Just one more question, because members of Aajja have a meeting next door.
Yes,
so
I'm sorry for that.
Yeah. Or what we could do is to that we can stop the questions here, and they can ask you over the tea or coffee that's there. So that can be done. I seriously want to thank you, because I see two Pinkish and Shilpa there. One of them is an industrial designer who is doing a very industrialized discipline approach, and on the other side you're also doing sculpting. You know, and you're marrying both of them, and that's really wonderful. You know.
Thank you.
It's very nice that these approaches are merged together. So thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So Aajja members are requested to go to the next hall, because the general body meetings are there. Meanwhile, I think Manisha has a little sweet thing to do.
Thanks for being here.
That means a lot. That means a lot.
since we started. It's good to have you bring your particular.
We've been delivering the Aajja not so far